Welcome to Creating Wealth with Jason Hartman. During this program, Jason is going to tell you some really exciting things that you probably haven't thought of before, and a new slant on investing. Fresh new approaches to America's best investment that will enable you to create more wealth and happiness than you ever thought possible. Jason is a genuine, self-made multimillionaire who not only talks the talk, but walks the walk. He's been a successful investor for 20 years and currently owns properties in 11 states and 17 cities. This program will help you follow in Jason's footsteps on the road to financial freedom. You really can do it. And now, here's your host, Jason Hartman, with the complete solution for real estate investors.
This is Jason Hartman. Today we're going to interview Thomas Sowell, the author of Basic Economics and many other books. We're talking to him today mostly about his latest book, The Housing Boom and Bust. And Thomas Sowell is a consummate academic. I used to read him in Forbes magazine years ago and really always liked what he had to say. He was very reasonable and logical and interesting and did a great interview for us. The hypocrisy is amazing. You've got all these armchair bureaucrats that dictate things under the guise of let's preserve the beauty of the land and so forth. And certainly there's something to be said for planning and prudent things here. Obviously there's a place for that. I'm sure you would agree too. But you look at a place like Aspen, Colorado, right? Under the guise of preserving the environment, housing has become so expensive. All of the service people that work in the restaurants, that clean the homes of these zillionaires who already have their home there, they have to live down the valley and commute in. I mean, and they talk about the environment. How good is all that road traffic for the environment?
We have exactly the same problem here in Palo Alto, or like right near Stanford University, as you know. Only 7% of the Palo Alto policemen live in Palo Alto.
Yeah.
And they're probably chiefs and, officials who bought their homes 30 or 40 years ago.
Right.
But you're right. And the other thing, this especially ironic, and you have all the emphasis on race and low income and so forth, these are precisely the people who are forced out of these areas because of these restrictions on building. The black population of San Francisco today is less than half of what it was in 1970, even though the population of the city as a whole has gone up.
Right.
And that's true of a number of counties in California. Another group that gets pushed out are low-income people. San Francisco, in a period of about 2 years, they lost about something like, I think 16,000 families earning less than $150,000 a year moved out of San Francisco, and 17,000 earning more than $150,000 moved in. And so you're making it impossible for the very people that these places say they're interested in. Another group that gets very hard hit are people with children, small children, school-age children. So they're constantly closing schools because if you're old enough, if you're young enough rather, to have school-age children, chances are you have not yet reached your peak earning years. And only people who reach their peak earning years can afford to buy the kind of housing that you have after all these restrictions.
Do you think, Thomas, that the people, the powers that be here, do they know that this is happening? Do they know that their designs are either corrupt or have unintended consequences as they do? Or are they just oblivious to it? I
suspect they're oblivious at best because they have no incentive to find out. The utter hypocrisy in all this is that the environmentalists who push this stuff are constantly talking as if they're trying to save the last few patches of greenery from being paved over. In point of fact, over 90% of the land area of the United States of America is undeveloped. So that all the histrionics they go through is an utter farce. San Mateo County, for example, over half the land in the entire county has nothing built on it. And yet they're constantly saying, we need more open space. And what they really mean is they want a cordon sanitaire around these affluent communities so that only other affluent people can move into them.
Exactly.
It's called preserving the character of the community. And it's a farce in the housing market because housing turns over. Areas that used to be for the rich are now working-class neighborhoods. Harlem, for example, was once a middle-class Jewish neighborhood. It became a working-class black neighborhood. Many places the opposite occurs. Places that were once run down have now been gentrified. It happens with commercial properties. The original walled-off Astoria Hotel was torn down so that the Empire State Building could be built on that site. I mean, housing turns over. What happens is that affluent people who like the way things are now use the law to freeze that and deprive other people of the rights that they themselves exercised earlier.
You know what? You could not possibly be making more sense when you say that. That is so true. It reminds me of the bumper stickers you used to see in California. Welcome to California, now go home.
Yes.
When the state was getting inundated with so much immigration. And I live in an area right here in Orange County where there's a state beach, Crystal Cove State Beach, and it is completely undeveloped. And there are all these people who want to save Crystal Cove State Beach and make sure nobody can ever build there. And the fact is, nobody ever goes there. It's just weeds, and if you do go down there, it's beautiful. There's sand and, waves crashing and rock formations and stuff. And it's very nice, but it would seem to me that all of these so-called inclusive, tolerant, fair-minded, environmental, liberal type people would want to let that land be at least somewhat, and I'm saying prudently, I'm not saying let it run amok, let it be prudently and smartly developed so more people could have access to it. Rather than the way it is now, because there is less supply, you have multi-zillion-dollar homes on either end of Crystal Cove, and because they don't let any more supply be created, they just wall off the community, just like you said. So it is theirs, and they keep other people out under the guise of what is best for the environment.
They don't want to face that. Some years ago, my wife, who did a local column, wrote about how you can't be keeping everything off limits to building without, and at the same time think that you're helping the poor, or for that matter, in Palo Alto, even the middle class can't live there. I mean, the prices have gone up so high.
Yeah, it really is just another example of restraint of trade, and it's sort of a trust in a way, isn't it? It's an antitrust violation.
Oh, absolutely. But there are certain kinds of antitrust violations that the government is not interested in dealing with.
Yeah, that's true. Well, what is your prediction of what does the future look like, and what is a strategy for our listeners?
Oh heavens, I avoid giving personal financial advice and making predictions. But the general trend seems to me to be a sort of a replay of the New Deal. That is, these enormous sums of money that are being spent really don't show much promise of getting us out of the recession quickly. And I don't believe that's their purpose. I think, as with the New Deal, and Rahm Emanuel, the president's chief of staff, put it very clearly, you don't want to let a crisis go to waste, meaning that while people are panicked in a crisis, the federal government can do things they couldn't get away with politically otherwise.
Yeah, that's the old concept of the false flag. I mean, even if the crisis is legitimate, which this is on various levels, but sometimes the crisis is created so they can then go in and implement all their new policies. And I mean, that statement of Rahm Emanuel right at the beginning of the Obama administration was very scary to me.
It was, but the media typically didn't say much about it. I think the tip-off was this huge spending bill that was rushed through in 2 days, 1,000 pages, and no one could have read it.
You talking about the Paulson one or the Obama one?
No, the one during the Obama administration. I mean, 2 days, and then it sat on the president's desk for 3 days while he was off on holiday. So the question becomes, why is it necessary to rush such a bill through, particularly since everyone agrees that the actual money will not even be spent by the end of next year? And the answer is you have to rush it through, not in order to get out of the recession, but to get the government more power before people have a time to think about it, have hearings, and any opposition to develop for it.
Right.
And so they accomplished their purpose. Similarly with the General Motors thing, someone asked, if General Motors is going to go bankrupt, why does the federal government need to pour tens of billions of dollars into General Motors, and then they still go bankrupt? Why not let them go bankrupt without the tens of billions of dollars? And the question is, well, the tens of billions of dollars do not buy success for General Motors or for the economy. What that buys is the power of the federal government to tell General Motors what to do, as exemplified by the president's getting the head of General Motors fired.
Sure. And now, at the end of this, the government will own 60% of the company.
Moreover, the government will also subsidize General Motors in other less visible ways, such as buying these kinds of cars that they're going to tell General Motors to build if nobody else buys them, which is a very likely thing that they will not be publicly popular.
Yeah, we are really on a socialist track, aren't we? In the good old U.S. of A.
We're on a fascist track, and the socialists want government ownership of the means of production. The fascists would allow the owners to stay owners, but the politicians would dictate to them. And that's much better politically for them in the sense that when something goes wrong at General Motors now, Obama can say, well, the General Motors didn't have good management practices. And so you can kibitz from the sidelines, force them to do things, but when they don't work out, then you can dump the blame on the owners.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Rather than it's still a centrally planned economy, but there's like one step removed with fascism, because then you have the corporatocracy indirectly, or well, directly, but they're just a puppet of the government, right?
Right.
Yeah. Very interesting. Well, so what is coming up? You don't give predictions, but give me some broad thoughts that you have. We won't hold you to it, but do you think inflation is coming?
Oh, I would bet the rent money on it. Mm-hmm. I mean, I don't know when governments have run these levels. Well, our government has never run these levels of deficits except in wartime, and you can't just keep doing that without inflation. I mean, you're conjuring up money out of thin air one way or another. And somewhere down the road, somebody's going to pay for it. And who's going to pay for it will be posterity. And as far as the politicians are concerned, that's fine, because posterity doesn't vote.
Right. It seems like we're going to have a big attack on our assets, and inflation is such an efficient means of wealth redistribution.